Saturday, 21st of March 2020. And as it seems, we have 450 confirmed COVID-19 cases here in Finland. And sadly, we have spread it through the whole Finnish continent. And it looks like it affects quite much younger folks too. Oh well. There are 61% of those that have had COVID-19 or are having COVID-19 are men, and 39% are women. So the same thing continues here in Finland as it was in Wuhan, that it mainly affects more men. But I am a bit worried. There were some politicians who said that it does not affect at all children. And I was slightly mad about that, saying it does affect children. That's why it is necessary to close schools, though it's not as simple as that, as we all know, because all those in the front line most of those who are in the front line has children, and children has to be cared of. Numbers. I have not watched these numbers too often, and last time I watched, if I remember right, numbers that are in Sweden now were in Italy, and at that time those numbers looked scary. Oh my god. Looking not good. In Turkey, every fifth person that has been tested from COVID-19 has had COVID-19. Wow. And here it says, our police says that we need everybody to win this COVID-19 creature. Every one of us has to acknowledge the situation right now. WHO says that youngsters are not safe from this disease. It might get you to hospital and it might kill you.
Today, I have a message for young people. You're not invincible. This virus could put you in hospital for weeks or even kill you. Even if you don't get sick, The choices you make about where you go could be the difference between life and death for someone else. I'm grateful that so many young people are spreading the word and not the virus.
that was well said. Okay. 9:50. Something about health. Oh, now I remember. I put the text as I previously did. 9:50.
Also have advice for individuals around the world, especially those who are now adjusting to a new reality. We know that for many people, life is changing dramatically. My family is no different. My daughter is now taking her classes online from home because her school is closed. During this difficult time, it's important to continue looking after your physical and mental health. This will not only help you in the long term, it will also help you fight COVID if you get it. First, eat a healthy and nutritious diet, which helps your immune system to function properly. Second, limit your alcohol consumption and avoid sugary drinks. Third, don't smoke. Smoking can increase your risk of developing severe disease if you become infected with COVID-19. Fourth, exercise. WHO recommends 30 minutes of physical activity a day for adults and 1 hour a day for children. If your local or national guidelines allow it, go outside for a walk, a run or a ride, and keep a safe distance from others. If you can't leave the house, find an exercise video online, dance to music, do some yoga, or walk up and down the stairs. If you're working at home, make sure you don't sit in the same position for long periods. Get up and take a 3-minute break every 30 minutes. We will be providing more advice on how to stay healthy at home in the coming days and weeks. Fifth, look after your mental health. It's normal to feel stressed, confused, and scared during a crisis. Talking to people you know and trust can help. Supporting other people in your community can help you as much as it does them. Check on neighbors, family, and friends. Compassion is a medicine. Listen to music, read a book, or play a game. And try not to read or watch too much news if it makes you anxious. Get your information from reliable sources once or twice a day. To increase access to reliable information, WHO has worked with WhatsApp and Facebook to launch a new WHO Health Alert messaging service. This service will provide the latest news and information on COVID-19, including details on symptoms and how to protect yourself. The Health Alert service is now available in English and will be introduced in other languages next week. To access it, send the word "Hi" to the following number on WhatsApp: 0041 798 931 892. We will make this information on our website later today. COVID-19 is taking so much from us, but it's also giving us something special, the opportunity to come together as one humanity, to work together, to learn together, to grow together.
True. And then measuring things. 23, 23, 23, 3, 3. 20. Okay, I am a bit crazy person, sorry. Is that 40 something? 23, 40? Well, let's start there.
Fairly widespread in communities. But what we should hope is, and this is maybe the thing that we have to be very careful with, large-scale physical distancing, movement restriction are in a sense a temporary measure. What they do is they slow down to some extent the spread of infection in communities and thereby take pressure off the healthcare system. They don't fundamentally deal with the problem of disease transmission. And if you want to get back to what countries like Korea are doing, Japan or China and Singapore and Hong Kong and others, if you want to get back to that, you really have to get back to the hardcore public health measures of case finding, contact tracing, quarantine, isolation. So in some senses, we need to slow down the virus, then we need to suppress the virus, and then we need to go after the virus. And that takes different combinations of different measures. But social or physical distancing measures and movement restriction measures are very hard socially and they're very hard economically. And we need to use whatever time those measures are in place to put in place the public health architecture that can then go after the virus. Because lifting those measures may result in the disease returning if you don't have in place the public health measures to deal with the virus. Maria.
Yeah, I think if you think just very simply about what physical distancing can do, if you think of a large gathering or you think of a crowded space and people are very close to one another, if you have infected individuals in that clustering of people, the opportunity for the virus to pass between people is much greater because you are physically closer to one another. What physical distancing does is just that. It actually separates people out. So think of that same cluster of people, but spread out over a much larger geographic area. Just think of a drawing, where you're seeing a bunch of dots. Either they're very close together or they're very spread apart. If those dots are spread apart and those dots represent people, and you have infected people in those areas, you remove the exposure. You remove the opportunity for that virus to pass between one person and another. But as Mike has said, and as we have said before, social distancing, physical distancing alone is not enough. It has to be part of a much larger package of interventions.
It is so. And then time after time after time, the need of tests. There is so many countries such as Finland that does not have tests enough to know the situation where we are. In Finland, so we have 450 cases confirmed to be known, and even our health agency admits that it's 30 times more.
Tests, has India lost critical time?
So it's wonderful that we're seeing testing being done across countries. We know that there are challenges associated with doing that test. We know we are working very hard across all of our regions with many different manufacturers to ensure that tests are available in countries that need them. We're working with labs across all countries to ensure that the lab capacity in each country is increasing. And we're seeing many countries take additional steps to further increase that capacity. What the DG meant when he said test, test, test was that we would like to see we recommend that all suspect cases be tested, and we recommend that all contacts that have symptoms are tested. And the reason that that is absolutely critical is that we need to know where this virus is so that we could stop the onward transmission from those who are infected to infect other people. And so by doing that, by having adequate testing and ample testing as part of your strategy will help reduce this down. But that isn't enough. We know that by finding those cases, isolating cases, and caring for those cases is critical. quarantining of your contacts so that they cannot pass that virus onward is absolutely critical to stopping transmission moving between people.
Thank you, Maria. DG, you wanted to?
Yep. Again about the tests, 35/16 I have put here for some odd reason. 35/16. Ah, that's there.
If I give you a sense of scale, WHO has distributed 1.5 million lab tests around the world. If we look forward in this epidemic and we project ourselves forward a number of months and the amount of testing that's going to be needed, we need to scale that up approximately 80 to 100 times. So it's not about doubling the availability of lab tests, it's not about trebling it, it's about potentially increasing that 80-fold. Now that's an extreme analysis, but that's what we need to aim for. And the Director General outlined the mechanisms by which we're going to achieve that, working with the public-private partnership and scaling up production and access to tests as they are needed. Equally, we estimate that there are probably, if you look again around the world, probably in excess of 26 million healthcare workers who may have to at some point engage in healthcare to people who potentially have COVID-19. That's an awful lot of healthcare workers to protect. You work out that those healthcare workers are doing a few hour shifts. They have to change PPE every time they do a shift. They have to be trained to use that PPE. I think you can see just what the gaps are in terms of masks and gowns and gloves in that. But as I say, we're validating those numbers because we have to match them against what countries actually have. The greatest tragedy for me, among all the tragedies we're seeing in this outbreak, is the prospect of losing part of our health workforce, that those individuals, those doctors and nurses and hygienists and others who put themselves in the front line to care for our most vulnerable would themselves become exposed, become sick and potentially die because they don't have protective equipment. It is a huge responsibility at local, at national and at global level that we protect the supply chains for health workers around the world and that we have solidarity between governments, between producers, manufacturers and others to ensure that our bravest get the best possible protection.
Yep. 4140. Oh, this is not normal. The situation we are living. We. Have I ever had a chance to say we so much as now? This affects everybody. And we are we. 4114. Let's start there.
I think you may be mixing up two lines of logic here. There have been over 200,000 confirmed cases reported, and we have 10,000 deaths. So deaths can be calculated as a proportion of those. We try to avoid that in general because very often your reported cases reflect infections up to 14 days before, but your deaths can actually reflect people who were exposed 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before. So it's not necessarily a good thing to make that calculation. But using deaths as a way of calculating how many people are infected is making an assumption that you actually you can make that calculation. And unfortunately, we can't make that calculation. What I think we need to focus on, and many people, we will have to wait for serology tests to really understand what the population attack rates are. But all of the data so far suggests that asymptomatic cases are a relatively low proportion of symptomatic cases. We don't know beyond that whether there are others who just get infected and just develop antibodies and never ever know they're infected or may not even be infectious. The question is what's driving infection? And what we believe is driving infection is, for the overwhelming majority of people who are infected, they're infected by a symptomatic other individual. Somebody who is sick and symptomatic, who either coughs or sneezes close by, or who contaminates a surface close by. That is the main driver of transmission, and that's what we have to focus on in order to avoid infection. We can worry about all of the other ways that we could possibly be infected theoretically, and that's important, and there are outliers in all of science, but the driving force is that. With regard to the deaths, rather than trying to, when we can say 10,000 deaths, and sounds like a lot, and then other people say, well, you know, people die of other things too. But take one look at what's happening in some health systems around the world. Look at the intensive care units completely overwhelmed, the doctors and nurses utterly exhausted. This is not normal. This isn't just a bad flu season. These are health systems that are collapsing under the pressure of too many cases. This is not normal. This is not just a little bit worse than we're used to. This is tough for systems. And therefore trying to use the absolute number of deaths as a measure of the overall impact of this outbreak is probably not the right term to use. But certainly when we say 1% overall case fatality, it's a number. But when I would say to you that in certain situations, particularly in the over 70s, in a number of situations, the case fatality, the clinical case fatality, the case fatality in those people admitted to hospital is up to 1 in 5 for people over the age of 70 years of age. That's a really, really serious outcome for anyone being admitted with COVID-19. And equally, when we look at people in intensive care, if you look at in Italy at the moment, 2 out of 3 people in intensive care in Italy are under the age of 70. And in fact, 12% of people in intensive care in Italy are under the age of 50. So again, let's look not just at deaths, let's look at severity, let's look at the impact this is having in society.
Yep. 48. And then I stop this. Let's start there.
Those candidates through the necessary testing. And many people are asking, well, why do we have to test the vaccines? Why don't we just make the vaccines and give them to people?
Yeah.
Well, the world has learned many lessons in the mass use of vaccines, and there's only one thing more dangerous than a bad virus, and that's a bad vaccine. So we have to be very, very, very careful in developing any product that we're going to inject into potentially most of the world's population. We have to be very, very, very careful that we first do no harm. So that's why people are being careful. Well, to be 8 weeks into a major event of a new disease and have a vaccine going into the arm of a volunteer this week is just unprecedented in its speed, and that would never have happened had countries not put the genetic sequences out in public. And I think that again shows why solidarity is so important. But we will face another challenge down the line, and one that the Director General is very concerned about and is reaching out to other institutions like Gavi and others to discuss right now. And that is that even if we get a vaccine that's effective, we have to have that vaccine available for everybody. There has to be fair and equitable access to such a vaccine, not just for ethics reasons, but because the world will not be protected until everyone is protected. So in that sense, there are other hurdles to cross now, not just the hurdles of science, but the hurdles of how do we scale up the production of such a vaccine? How do we ensure we get enough of that vaccine in time? How do we distribute that vaccine to populations all over the world? And how do we convince people to take the vaccine? Because you've all seen over the last few years the loss of confidence in vaccines. It's one thing having a vaccine, but people need to avail of that vaccine. So there's a lot of work to do, and the Director General will be leading a process with other organisations to address the issues of production, scale-up, financing, advanced market commitments, and fair and equitable distribution of those vaccines, and has already been reaching out to major institutions and global health leaders on this.
That's that. So I put the texts as needed, as I saw. There are very nice information here and there that you should listen to yourself. So let's not touch faces, let's just not shake hands. but wash our hands and keep the distance and take care of everybody from the distance. Shall we? Take care. Bye.